Jon Bon Jovi once laughed about how different life was when he was a teenager. Back then, driver's licenses were made of paper, and if you were bold enough, you could change a number with a little white correction fluid. He joked that in New Jersey, many teenagers did it. You could rub your hand across the paper, adjust the age slightly, and hope the bouncer at the club would not look too closely. It was risky and naive, but it showed the kind of fearless attitude he had even as a kid. That same bold spirit would later define his music career and his personal life. Jon Bon Jovi, whose real name is Jon Bon Jovi, spent more than 4 decades as one of the biggest faces of rock and roll romance. He was the man who sang about love, faith, and holding on during hard times. He wrote songs that made millions of people believe in forever. He married his high school sweetheart in secret, creating what many saw as a real-life fairy tale. But in April 2024, during an interview, he said something that shocked fans around the world. He admitted that he had got away with murder and mentioned being with around 100 women. He called it an arrogant cliché. People immediately wondered what he truly meant and what had really happened behind closed doors. Why did his wife stay with him after everything? What was the full truth behind those words? To understand the story, you have to go back to the beginning. He was born as John Francis Bon Jovi Jr. on March 2, 1962, in Perth Amboy. His parents were both former United States Marines. That meant his home was built on discipline, strength, and hard work. His father, John Francis Bon Jovi Sr., worked as a barber after leaving the service. His mother, Carol Sharkey, was a strong and determined woman who later worked as a florist and ran different businesses. She once said that her time in the Marine Corps was nothing compared to the challenges she faced growing up. The family was not rich, but they were proud and hardworking. John grew up with 2 brothers, Anthony and Matthew, in a house where you were expected to stand up for yourself and always support your family. There was also an unusual chapter in his mother's life. In the early 1960s, she became one of the original Playboy bunnies at the Manhattan Playboy Club when it first opened. She worked around women who later became famous and even met major celebrities like Frank Sinatra. John later described that time in her life as a cool and interesting chapter. However, despite that glamorous experience, their home life remained simple and modest. His parents focused on raising their children with strong values. Years later, his mother would even help run his band's official fan club, earning the loving nickname Mom Jovi from fans. She passed away in July 2024, just days before her 84th birthday, and John described her as a powerful force who always pushed the family forward. That drive appeared in John at a very young age. When he was only 12 years old, he formed his first band and entered a school talent show. They finished last, but he did not let that defeat stop him. Instead of quitting, he kept going. Around that same time, he started teaching himself how to play piano and guitar. He practiced songs by artists like Elton John, treating music not as a hobby but as his future. Even as a teenager, he spent time around local New Jersey clubs, believing strongly that he would become a rock star one day. At 16, he met David Bryan, and together they formed an R&B cover band called Atlantic City Expressway. Even though they were underage, they managed to perform in local clubs. John also played in other early bands, including one called Jon Bon Jovi and the Wild Ones. He performed at places like the Fast Lane, slowly building his confidence on stage. Each performance helped him grow stronger and more comfortable in front of crowds. High school brought another important moment into his life. He first attended St. Joseph High School but later transferred to Sayreville War Memorial High School. In 1980, he met Dorothea Hurley there. Their first interaction became famous later because John admitted he was struggling in history class, and Dorothea let him copy her answers. He said he felt drawn to her from the moment he saw her. That simple classroom connection became the beginning of a relationship that would survive fame, rumors, and decades of pressure. Dorothea was not impressed by fame or dreams of stardom. She knew him before the headlines, before the posters, and before the screaming fans. She came from a similar New Jersey background and valued simple things. She was also strong in her own right. She trained in karate, eventually earning a 4th-degree black belt and becoming an instructor. She was independent and confident, and she was not someone who would disappear in her husband's shadow. Still, their relationship was not perfect. In 1985, they briefly broke up during a time when Jon's career pressure was increasing. During that period, he dated actress Diane Lane for about 5 months. It seemed possible that his relationship with Dorothea might truly end. However, time apart helped them realize how important they were to each other. They eventually reunited, stronger and more aware of what they could lose. While his personal life faced challenges, his music career was also struggling at first. In 1982, he recorded a song called Runaway at a New York studio with session musicians. He carried the demo to many record labels, hoping for a deal. Instead, he received rejection after rejection. At one point, he nearly gave up. But in 1983, he walked into a radio station in New York and personally pitched the song to a DJ. The station played it on a compilation album, and the song began to gain attention. The only problem was that he did not yet have a real band. He quickly formed one, and after some early changes in members, guitarist Richie Sambora joined. The connection between Jon and Richie was immediate. They began writing songs together right away, and that chemistry became part of the band's signature sound. The band eventually became known worldwide as Bon Jovi. The early years were difficult. They recorded their second album in tough conditions, living together in a small apartment during a cold winter. Money was tight, and success was uncertain. But they kept working, touring, and pushing forward. Then in 1986, everything changed with the release of Slippery When Wet. The album became a massive success, reaching #1 on the Billboard 200 chart and turning the band into global superstars. Songs like You Give Love a Bad Name and Livin' on a Prayer became anthems. The music told stories of working-class people holding on to hope, something Jon understood from his own upbringing. Fame exploded around him. Tours stretched across countries. Fans filled arenas night after night. He became one of the most recognized faces in rock music. At the peak of that success, on April 29, 1989, he and Dorothea secretly eloped in Las Vegas. They got married at a small chapel without telling their manager, bandmates, or even their parents. The decision shocked many people in the industry. At that time, being a married rock star was seen as bad for image and marketing. But Jon stood by his choice. For him, it was not about business. It was about love and loyalty. Life on tour was exhausting. Between 1984 and 2015, the band completed 14 major tours, traveling across more than 50 countries. One tour included 237 shows in just 16 months. The pressure and constant travel left the band members physically and emotionally drained. After one long tour ended in 1990, they were so exhausted they could barely speak to each other. Behind the bright lights and cheering crowds, there were also hotel rooms, loneliness, and temptation. It was during this time that Jon later admitted he had been unfaithful. When he said he had got away with murder, he was not speaking literally. He meant that he had lived the typical rock star lifestyle and faced temptations that came with fame. He admitted to being with many women during his touring years. He called it arrogant and foolish. He made it clear that he was not proud of those choices. The reason his confession shocked people was because his public image had always been tied to romance and loyalty. Yet he explained that despite his mistakes, he never allowed those moments to threaten his marriage. He said he was careful not to let outside relationships become emotional attachments. To him, there was always a line he did not cross. He claimed that his heart always belonged to Dorothea. Dorothea's strength played a major role in their survival as a couple. She understood the pressures of fame but also knew the man behind the spotlight. Over the years, they built a family together and raised 4 children. They focused on charity work and community projects. She remained grounded, and he gradually matured. The truth behind his 2024 confession is complicated. It shows that even someone who sings about everlasting love can make mistakes. It shows that fame brings temptation and that relationships require forgiveness and growth. Their marriage survived not because it was perfect, but because both of them chose to keep fighting for it. In the end, the story is not as simple as a love song. It is about two teenagers from New Jersey who grew up together, faced enormous pressure, made mistakes, and still chose each other again and again. It is about discipline from his Marine parents, courage to chase music, loyalty that survived fame, and honesty that arrived later in life. The confession did not destroy the story. Instead, it made it more human. The song Bed of Roses was released in 1992 on the album Keep the Faith. Over time, Jon said it was his most personal song because it was not just a romantic ballad. It was a confession hidden inside beautiful music. By that point, he had already married his high school sweetheart, Dorothea, in 1989. She had always been the steady and stable part of his life. However, life on the road followed different rules. Fame brought temptation, and in the world of rock music, that temptation often felt normal. The lyrics about wanting to lay someone down on a bed of roses while he was sleeping on a bed of nails carried deep emotion. They described the feeling of enjoying fame while also feeling guilty and torn inside because his heart still belonged at home. For many years, rumors followed him. People wondered what was true and what was gossip. In 2006, after 17 years of marriage, he finally spoke openly in an interview with the Irish Examiner. He said that rock music came with a destructive image and a culture of pleasure-seeking. He admitted that he had fun and that he made mistakes with other women. He did not try to make his words sound soft or innocent. Instead, he described it as something common in the music industry. Fans were shocked because many believed he was different from other rock stars. They thought he had stayed completely faithful. His honesty changed that image. Even after those admissions, Dorothea stayed with him. That part of the story is important. He later explained that their marriage survived because he never pretended to be perfect. At the same time, he claimed he tried not to be careless enough to destroy his family. It sounded like someone trying to explain mistakes without letting them define his entire life. Then in April 2024, during an ABC special called Halfway There with Michael Strahan, he spoke even more openly. He said he had got away with murder during the wild years of the 1980s. He even mentioned that there may have been around 100 women in his life. The comment spread quickly online because it sounded bold and almost proud. Soon after, in a June 2024 interview with The Guardian, he called that comment an arrogant cliché and suggested he may have spoken carelessly. That only made people talk more. He also explained something important about his marriage. When he married Dorothea secretly in Las Vegas in 1989, his management team was angry. They wanted him to appear single because that image sold more tickets and posters. Being a married rock star did not fit the fantasy they were selling. Still, he chose real life over marketing. On May 31, 1993, Jon and Dorothea welcomed their first child, Stephanie Rose Bon Jovi. At that time, he was still dealing with the pressure of fame and long tours. Becoming a father changed him. It made every decision feel heavier. He even wrote a song for Stephanie called I've Got the Girl, and she later danced on stage with him when she was 7 years old. It was a sweet moment that showed how he tried to connect his family life with his career, even though those two worlds often felt impossible to balance. Their second child, Jesse James Lewis, was born on February 19, 1995. Years later, on May 7, 2002, their son Jacob, known as Jake, was born. Their youngest son, Romeo John, arrived on March 29, 2004. There was an 11-year gap between Stephanie and Romeo, which meant Jon was raising teenagers and young children at the same time. Meanwhile, touring continued to pull him away from home for months. He later admitted that he sometimes left for tours feeling upset because he wanted to stay with his family. Dorothea worked hard to keep their home normal. She did not treat his fame like something magical. She did not turn on the television and point to him as if he were a celebrity first and a father second. They tried to have dinner together whenever possible. Those simple family meals became their way of staying grounded. Sometimes his children reminded him that fame did not automatically impress them. Two of his younger sons once chose not to attend one of his concerts. He said moments like that kept him humble because at home, he was just their dad. As the children grew older, they built their own paths. In early 2018, Jesse partnered with his father and French winemaker Gerard Bertrand to create a rose wine called Hampton Water. The wine became successful very quickly. In its first year, Wine Spectator ranked it the #1 rose in the world and placed it at number 83 on its top 100 wines list for 2018 with a 90-point rating. It was a different kind of achievement, not connected to music but still carrying the family name. Jake's life also brought attention to the family. On April 11, 2023, he became engaged to Millie Bobby Brown after dating her since 2021. She announced their engagement with a photo and a caption that quoted a lyric by Taylor Swift about loving someone for 3 summers and wanting them all. They reportedly married in a small ceremony in May 2024 with close family members present, including Jon and Dorothea. Later, they celebrated again in Tuscany in 2025. Jon publicly gave his blessing and described Millie as wonderful. He even joked that he was not very familiar with Stranger Things because it belonged to a younger generation. In many ways, Jake's young marriage reminded people of Jon's own early decision to marry despite public pressure. Despite the family's happy moments, there were also painful ones. On November 14, 2012, at 1:51 a.m., police responded to a 911 call at Hamilton College in New York. 19-year-old Stephanie had overdosed on heroin and was found unconscious in her dorm room. She was taken to the hospital, and drugs were found at the scene. She and another student were charged with possession. However, the charges were dropped the next day under New York's Good Samaritan law, which protects people who call for help during an overdose. For Jon, the legal details did not matter as much as the phone call he received around 2 a.m. He later described it as the worst moment of his life as a father. Stephanie's first words were, "I'm all right." Even though she survived, the fear was overwhelming. He told her to come home immediately. Later, he spoke carefully about the incident, calling it human and thanking people for their support. Stephanie eventually transferred to a different school in New York City and graduated in 2017. The experience deeply affected the entire family and reminded them of how fragile life can be. While Jon was dealing with family challenges, the band faced its own problems. On April 2, 2013, just hours before a sold-out show in Calgary, guitarist Richie Sambora did not appear. A short statement said he would miss the show due to personal issues. He never returned to the tour. After working together since 1983, the partnership quietly ended. Over time, Richie explained that he needed to focus on his daughter, Ava, who was 15 at the time. He had also faced struggles with alcohol and medication and had entered rehab more than once. In later interviews, he said he chose happiness and family over money. In April 2024, Jon said he had been waiting for 10 years to truly talk with Richie about how everything ended. He said there was never hatred between them, only love, but they never fully discussed the split. He also said the door was always open for his return. That kind of unfinished ending often hurts more than a clear fight. In 2024, the band's story was retold in the Hulu documentary Thank You Goodnight, The Bon Jovi Story. The documentary showed both the successes and the mistakes. It also reminded viewers that in 2010, Jon had once insisted that people would never read scandalous stories about him. Over time, he stopped trying to protect a perfect image and instead admitted his flaws. Then another challenge appeared. In 2022, he discovered that one of his vocal cords was weakening and beginning to fail. After decades of singing, the damage was serious. He underwent a medical procedure called medialization thyroplasty in Philadelphia, where doctors placed an implant to help support the weaker cord. Recovery required daily exercises and discipline. He said he would not return to touring unless he could perform at a high level. On October 23, 2025, Bon Jovi announced the Forever Tour, their first tour in 4 years, connected to their 2024 album Forever. The tour included 9 shows at Madison Square Garden in July 2026. After everything he had faced, returning to the stage felt less like a celebration and more like a personal test. On April 29, 2025, exactly 1 year after his viral confession, Jon and Dorothea celebrated their 36th wedding anniversary. He posted a photo from their 1989 Las Vegas wedding and shared that he gave her 36 roses for 36 years of marriage. That small gesture carried deep meaning. Their life together had included fame, temptation, fear, mistakes, and forgiveness. It was not a perfect love story, but it was real. They had survived moments that could have destroyed them. Through every tour, confession, and crisis, Dorothea stayed. In the end, their story was not about being flawless. It was about choosing each other again and again, even when the spotlight made everything harder.